Good evening. I'm Diana Sky, and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk warned that appeasing Russian President Vladimir Putin makes, quote, no sense following Moscow's largest ever drone attack on Ukraine. Now, the overnight strike set the main government building in Kiev ablaze and killed at least 3 people in the country's capital, including an infant. Now, we'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Ukraine strikes Russia's Druzhba pipeline. And Belgrade Pride March goes ahead amid massive student protests. Warsaw's Animal Shelter organizes its annual adoption event. And we begin in Ukraine, where Russia launched another massive wave of strikes overnight, targeting central Kiev, resulting in Ukraine's main government building in the capital being set ablaze now for the first time in the war. Strikes also hit Odesa, Kryviy Rih, Zaporizhzhia and Poltava. Ukraine's Air Force says Russia used hundreds of drones and missiles in the assault. Let's now go live to our correspondent, Oz Chatterjee, who is in Kyiv for more. Good evening, Oz. Now, what is the latest on the ground? Any updates on casualties, and what exactly is happening with the government building?
Well, the fire was put out in the government building. That's the Cabinet of Ministers building where the Prime Minister has an office. Now, this area is blocked off. Regular civilians can't go to that area since the war began. But the fire was put out earlier on in the day. However, that was something that you could see right across the city of Kyiv in the morning following those attacks. The Ukrainian Air Force saying Russia launched 810 drones, 9 cruise missiles and 4 ballistic missiles onto the territory of Ukraine. Now, again, as you said, damaging a government building for the first time. So this is a significant escalation. Kyiv wasn't the only place that was targeted. As you said, there were other cities, 8 different regions across Ukraine targeted. 4 people killed overall across the entirety of Ukraine, as you said, including in Kyiv, where a mother and child were killed in that bombardment. Now, President Zelensky has released a forceful condemnation calling for sanctions in response to this attack. Let's take a listen to that statement released a short while ago.
It is important that there is a broad response from partners to this attack today. It is clear that Russia is trying to inflict pain on Ukraine, and the attacks are becoming more brazen. Their losses must be felt. This is what is convincing, this as well as our long-range capabilities. Putin does not want negotiations. He is clearly hiding from them, so the gasoline shortage in Russia and other economic problems are a logical outcome to Russia's refusal to agree to a ceasefire and to a meeting of leaders.
The attack also drew widespread condemnation from leaders around the world, including European leaders. Here's what the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk had to say.
The Russian attack on Kiev's government buildings shows again that the continued delaying of a strong reaction against Putin and the attempts to appease him make no sense. The US and Europe must together force Russia to accept an immediate ceasefire. We have all the instruments.
Very clear how the Europeans and the Ukrainians feel about the matter. The question now goes back to Washington, where the US Treasury Secretary has implied that the United States could increase sanctions pressure on Russia, but that could be the operative word. There's still no sign of any announcement of further sanctions. The other issue that Zelensky touched upon is air defenses. These were air defenses that have been promised to Ukraine by partner countries in Europe that Zelensky really wants to see arrive in country to help protect from attacks such as the ones we've seen tonight. Back to you, Diana.
That's right, Oz, and it seems as though, we're talking about ceasefire, but, Ukraine keeps getting attacked worse and worse every night. Thank you so much, Oz Chatterjee, coming to us live from Kiev. And now, as Ukraine reels from Russian missile strikes overnight, Kiev is hitting back. Ukraine has targeted Russia's Druzhba, or friendship oil pipeline, deep inside Russia. But now, unlike previous attacks on Russian territory that triggered protests from Hungary and Slovakia, this time, Washington's pressure has kept their response restrained. Kazimierz Wysiak reports on how this latest Ukrainian attack goes to show that this war isn't only about territory, but also a battle for energy and strategic leverage.
This footage, released on Telegram, reportedly shows the moment Ukrainian drones struck the Russian oil pipeline Druzhba on Saturday night. It was published by Ukraine's top drone unit commander, Robert Brovdy.
Bad evening for the pipeline. We are from Ukraine. A complex fire attack on an oil pump was carried out by units of the SBS Bird. To be continued.
That's at least the third Ukrainian strike on the pipeline in the span of just 4 weeks. Previous attacks raised outrage from Hungary and Slovakia, the two EU countries which still purchase large amounts of Russian oil flowing through Druzhba. This latest strike comes only 2 days after Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
We are open to joint projects in the energy sector and remain open to supplying Slovakia with oil and gas, unless, as I made clear to the Prime Minister, the gas and oil comes from Russia, because we are at war, period.
We respect how countries protect their national interest, but at the same time, we should also respect the interests of others. We discussed with Russian President Vladimir Putin the issue of attacks on oil infrastructure on the territory of the Russian Federation.
In all of 2024, Slovakia imported almost 4 million tons of oil through the Druzhba pipeline from Russia, worth at least €1.75 billion. That makes up 75% of all of Slovakia's supplies. While it's a significant drop from 96% in 2022, that's still a major reason for Robert Fico's sympathy for Vladimir Putin.
Slovakia is also supplying Ukraine with the electricity, and Putin is developing pressure to Slovakia and Hungary to cut the supplies of energy to Ukraine because of Ukrainian attacks on oil pipeline systems.
That means that the war in Ukraine is as much about territory as it is about energy and the money that comes with it. But the outrage of Slovakia and Hungary, raised after the previous strikes on Druzhba, drew the attention of another one of the biggest partners, the United States.
U.S. President Donald Trump is explicitly saying that Europe has to stop buying Russian energy resources.
After Trump's comments, neither Slovakia's Fico nor Hungary's Orban have protested about this latest drone strike. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Łysiak.
For the family, that was the slogan of this year's Pride March, meant to celebrate diversity in Belgrade, but instead the march carried a heavy tone. Organizers say this year's gathering was about resilience in the face of mounting pressure as police crackdowns and protests cast a shadow over Serbia's LGBTQ community and beyond. Agata Dura has the story.
For the family, that was the slogan of this year's Belgrade Pride March.
We have a church that is steeped in ethno-fallism that has nothing to do with religion, but rather with supporting neo-fascist aggression. We have a very small number of voices that oppose this.
But this year's march had a particularly somber tone.
In the way that the situation in Serbia is such as it has not been in the last 24 years. It is specific in terms of the brutality of the police in numerous situations that we have witnessed in various places in Serbia.
Women journalists in particular are targeted, as well as LGBTQ people.
Serbia is not Russia nor Belarus. With these words, the participants of the march want to send one message: attacks on protesters are unacceptable. These are the scenes that the demonstrators are referring to. That's Novi Sad, Serbia's second largest city. On Friday, police used stun grenades and tear gas to disperse the protesters.
Over 20 canisters were fired into the crowd. People choked, stumbled, fell. Several were arrested. Some were dragged into one of the university buildings, confined in an amphitheater, and held there for hours without clear charges.
The protests began in November last year after the canopy of the Novi Sad main train station collapsed, leading to the death of 16 people.
These are the most continuous, sustained demonstrations in Serbia's history. Nobody in the Balkans has seen anything like this.
The demonstrators say the railway station was poorly reconstructed. They say this is a result of corruption by the government and the president Alexander Vučić. The president, who on Saturday told them this.
Protesters were helped by that European scum who came here to destroy our country. Go ruin your own countries. Don't try to ruin Serbia, you scum. You're not even scum. You're worse than that. That's all I have to say to you.
But as experts point out...
Well, he does different things at the same time that seem to be contradictory of each other.
Vučić, he's trying to, in Serbia, we like to say that sitting on two chairs. You know, when he's in Moscow, he's talking all the best about Russia and all the worst for European Union. And when he's in Brussels, he's talking bad about Russia, and he's talking that Serbia is on European path.
The protesters demand a snap election and the publication of the full documentation of the train station renovation process. So far, only part of it has been published. For TVP World, I'm Agata Dura.
Chisinau has been steering toward Europe for the past 4 years now. But in certain parts of Moldova, EU accession in itself is still viewed as an intrusion. Our Balkans correspondent, Pavel Chaskovsky, traveled to the south of the country to investigate how these regions could shape the outcome of the September 28th parliamentary elections.
Moldova is a small country with no more than 3 million citizens. However, it has one separatist region, Transnistria, and one autonomous region, Gagauzia. And Gagauzia, where I am now, is openly pro-Russian. In last year's EU accession referendum, almost 95% of all the votes cast were against Moldova joining the European bloc. And these anti-EU voices are being amplified by the people close to the Kremlin.
If in the context of the upcoming elections, the special about this region is that it is totally controlled by pro-Russian political forces, and more than that, it is totally controlled by organized criminal group, which is headed by the Ilan Shor, a person which is hiding from the Moldovan justice in Russia right now, and is responsible in Russia for money laundering. In a global context, he's running one of the two biggest money laundering organizations. And he's also responsible for destabilization of the Republic of Moldova.
And so pro-Russian propaganda thrives in Gagauzia. It is expected that up to 65,000 votes could be cast in this year's parliamentary elections, a number not to be underestimated given the fact that last year's EU accession referendum was decided with fewer than 11,000 votes. From Comrade, Moldova, for TVP World, I'm Pavel Trzaskowski.
For the first time in nearly a decade, Polish designers returned to the runway at Warsaw's Fashion Week, now featured on the official International Fashion Week calendar. Now, the event wrapped up with a gala on Saturday where a 90-year-old icon of Polish fashion unveiled his latest collection before passing the spotlight to a new generation of talent. Our reporter, Natalia Komaro, was on site and gives us a glimpse behind the glamour.
Warsaw returns to the map of European fashion capitals. On Saturday, Polish fashionistas gathered for the final gala of Warsaw Fashion Week, the first event of this kind in the Polish capital in almost a decade.
History is being written in front of our eyes, and I can be a part of it. It's every designer's dream.
The Warsaw Fashion Week grand finale opened with a show by Jerzy Antkowiak, a renowned name within the Polish industry. Until late 80s, Antkowiak was the designer behind an extremely popular brand Moda Polska, meaning simply Polish fashion. one of just a few stores offering up-to-date styles despite communist-era shortages.
I have huge respect for the man. He is incredibly talented. I mean, Moda Polska was #1 back in the 60s.
And Kowiak symbolically left the stage for a new generation of designers, but they aren't necessarily willing to break with tradition. For example, Sandra Skórka found inspiration in old Polish porcelain.
Specifically, I was inspired by porcelain from Chodzież, the Iwona collection with little roses. It's a collection which you used to encounter in almost every Polish home, so it makes me feel warm.
Damian Malesa prefers more futuristic designs.
I generally focus on futuristic stage outfits. Here you have an example. These are usually worn by celebrities, by artists, but I try not to limit myself.
Judging by the mood, the event proved to be a success.
After the gala, I will go to Paris and to Milan to spread the joyful news at shows like by Dior and Chanel. I will speak in interviews that here in Warsaw, in Poland, something amazing happened.
In Warsaw, in Poland, tu wydarzyło się coś wspaniałego.
Paris is elegant and chic. Milan is sexy. London is rebellious. And Warsaw is looking into the future while honoring its wealth of traditions. From Warsaw Fashion Week for TVP World, Natalia Komarow.
Another event happening in Warsaw this weekend was the Paluch Animal Shelter giving furry friends a chance at a new life. Now, their Adopt a Varsovian campaign lets visitors meet dozens of cats and dogs that are ready for loving homes. And some, like Sam, have even traveled from Ukraine for a fresh start. Randy Potts and Hubert Kisiel have the story.
Welcome, animal lovers, to the General Joseph Sowiński Park, where the Paluch Animal Shelter is hosting its Adopt a Varsovian campaign. Visitors have the wonderful opportunity to meet dozens of adorable dogs awaiting their forever homes. One dog, Sam, came to Warsaw from Ukraine just months after the full-scale invasion, at first too overweight and too traumatized to be adopted out.
He came from Ukraine, from the shelter in Kyiv, I think, and he has 6 years. He's 6 years old, and he was very shy at the beginning, but now he made such a great progress, and he's a very good, very great, happy dog.
We are inviting everyone for what we call Adopt a Varsovian. This is our outdoor event aimed at increasing chances of adoption for one of our rescue animals.
The adoption process is easy.
We start by finding our favorite dog on the shelter's website, one that fulfills our expectations. Then we set up an introductory walk to feel out our pupil. If it is okay between the dog and people, then the would-be dog owner will have to submit an application to officially adopt.
We hope you've been inspired by the incredible animals and dedicated caregivers of the Paluch Animal Shelter. The shelter encourages everyone to open their hearts and homes to a furry friend in need. For TVP World, Randy Potts.
And now back to our main story this evening. On Sunday morning, Moscow escalated its relentless campaign of strikes with a record-breaking drone attack on Kiev, hitting the main cabinet building. Now, as the Kremlin seems to be deliberately escalating the conflict, questions arise on how Ukraine and its allies should respond. Joining me now to discuss the unfolding events is Diane Francis, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Diane, so glad to have you here with us on TVP World this evening. Now, Diane, let me go straight into it. I mean, Russia is clearly ranking up its attacks, and particularly I want to ask you about this Ukraine's cabinet building being hit, right? I mean, our correspondent earlier told us just in the beginning of the show some 800 drones were used, 13 missiles fired at buildings, I mean, not only in Kiev, but across Ukraine in general. Now, I want to ask you, do you think that the strike on Kiev's government building, first of all, is it marking a turning point in Russia's war tactics?
Well, it's an escalation and it's a test. He's been bombarding the heck out of Ukraine since 2022. And he's, ignored ceasefire attempts by Trump several and deadlines. He's just ignored them. And, he's just pushing forward as though he doesn't care. And, this has got to be, it's hugely embarrassing for Trump, and it's got to be annoying to him. And so, and gradually, I hope that there'll be some kind of proper response to all of this. But, he's holding nuclear blackmail over everyone. And here's a war that is completely illegal and unprovoked and wrong. And the government building is a direct statement that I do not, which he said all along, regard the Ukrainian government as legitimate or its president. And, therefore, we're going to bomb the heck out of it, and we're not going to sit down at a table with Zelensky. And so this is the game he's playing. And, at some point, Donald Trump and Europe have to call his bluff. But that's, this is a very delicate situation right now and very upsetting.
Dan, you did mention Donald Trump's reaction to this, but I'll get to that just in a moment. But I want to ask you, do you think that Ukraine now is possibly going to rethink its own, so to say, red lines on how it responds to Moscow's continuous, relentless attacks? I mean, possible more strikes inside Russia. Are they going to step up their game this time?
Well, they've been doing a very good job of that, and they have been harming the oil industry, which is really important. That's how Putin finances his war. And something like 20% of their oil refining and facilities and pipelines have been knocked out by Ukrainian drones and missiles. And now they have a new missile that can go deep into the heart of Russia from Ukraine. And it's very powerful. And so they don't have to wait for the Germans to give them missiles or the Americans. They're just going to go for it. And I've read recently, and I'm not sure, I can vouch for this, but that Trump has given the nod for them to hit deep inside Russia to the extent they feel is necessary. So he's getting emboldened, and I want to see more toughness and more attempts by Trump to call Putin out for all this nonsense of bombing and ignoring and being in bad faith. Putin's end game is to string this along until maybe at some point the Ukrainians just say, we give up, we capitulate. I don't think they will, but that would be, but there may come a time at a point. There may come a time when the people, but right now the polling of the people are, hey, we know what Russia is, and this is another reason we don't want to live under their boot. And so it's an awful situation. It really depends. I think it very much will turn on Mr. Trump and whether he emboldens himself and does something really, really tough.
Right, Dan, but I mean, Trump has said that he is growing, increasingly pessimistic about this war in Ukraine. Let's not forget, originally and throughout his campaign, he did say that he could end this war in a mere 24 hours. And, now it's been almost a year of him as, the president of the United States. But what do you think that means for Ukraine in the near term of how, of how Trump is reacting right now and starting to finally understand that it's not going to be so easy as I believe it's safe to say that he thought, as much as he thought it would be, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, he started off with a charm offensive to try and, talk to Putin, but he's not dealing with a business arrangement in Manhattan with a landlord in Queens. He's dealing with a homicidal maniac who's on a mission, and he's not going to stop, and he doesn't want to stop. He has to be stopped. He will not pull back. He will not agree to a ceasefire. And so, Trump is getting the message. He realizes it. He's being strung along, and he's got to think about what he's going to do next. And I think, the obvious thing is he's got to absolutely cripple and crush the oil industry in Russia, its oil trade around the world, and its economy. And that means unbelievably punitive sanctions, which he's never imposed, That means all kinds of economic weaponry that he has at his disposal, which won't necessarily